Welcome back. Activists are planning emergency actions in 18 states after the Army has decided to allow the Dakota Access Pipeline. And it gets worse. North Dakota, among other states, are passing bills criminalizing peaceful protest.
Really? Okay, I'll hear you out.
As we know, protesting is as American as apple pie. Pockets.
Right, for everyone's benefit, I'll skip over the terrible jokes regarding the average American's diet of apple pie and diabetes. We've heard them all before, you're not original.
Even more American than diabetes. Our founding fathers were the rabble-rousers behind the Boston Tea Party. But thank God now that's all changing and we can finally get some peace and quiet. Because lawmakers in North Dakota are introducing legislation that would protect drivers who hit and kill protesters in the streets.
They're making it legal to kill protesters.
Yes.
Okay, let me just stop you there. First of all, I see you were quoting an article by Salon, of all sources. So that gives a good idea of how serious you take your journalism and research. Secondly, the careful choice of words didn't go unnoticed. You make it sound like they're trying to make it legal for drivers to mount the curb and mow over pedestrians on the path if they're protesting peacefully, which is clearly not the case. I also noticed the image use. The world's general knowledge of the Dakota Access Pipeline protests is that all of the protesters there are peaceful, and the police there have been heavy-handed to the point of hospitalizing some of the protesters. Well, that's how the story goes anyway. But we all know that it's nowhere near that black and white. But this is something the majority of people can get behind, because for the most part the Native Americans of Standing Rock are genuine victims here. However, if you used images of Black Lives Matter fuckwits standing in the middle of the road blocking traffic, your horrified shock value would be greatly diminished, wouldn't it? Because most of us would happily run those cunts over.
Check it out! Imagine driving! Ooh. I don't agree with that opinion at all. Die, anarchist! Oh shit, I think that was just a line for a Slipknot concert.
Again, you're deliberately misleading people here. Nowhere in this bill does it say you can drive into people on the path and get away with it. Not even CNN bullshit this much, which is where the next statement comes from. Keith Kempenich introduced the North Dakota Bill, which states that if a driver unintentionally causes injury or death to someone blocking traffic on a roadway, then the driver will not be liable for damages. Kempenich argued that any drivers who intentionally targeted protesters would still be prosecuted. He quoted us as saying, "If people stay off the roadway, it has nothing to do with you. But if you're on the roadway trying to intimidate some people, then you've got an issue." It's funny how you left that bit out because it doesn't fit your bullshit narrative.
Protest isn't even the right word. During the riots, during the eco-terrorism.
This is the first time in North Dakota where we've seen a large scale of what I would consider terrorism.
They're calling the protesters terrorists.
Okay, even I'd say it's a bit much to label protesters as terrorists. Still, I wouldn't call people who intentionally block roadways as protesters either.
Well, Lee, we know one man's freedom-fighting grandma marching through the snow, providing blankets to people getting blasted by water cannons in freezing temperatures, is another man's terrorist.
God, the level of bullshit hyperbole here is getting ridiculous now. No one is saying that it's legal to kill peaceful protesters. If you are not standing in the middle of the road, then you won't get run over.
Am I getting through to you at all?
Well, of course they're throwing them in jail. They're raising the penalty of causing economic damage to a felony and are broadening the definition of rioting to include standing still.
What's the problem here? Willfully causing damage should be a felony. Every time property is damaged, whether public or private, it's the people that live in that town or city will be the ones that pay the bill. You can't make a place better if everyone's tax dollars are spent repairing what's already been damaged. And if you're standing still in the middle of the road with the intention of blocking traffic, then of course it should be treated as a felony.
Naomi, protests are supposed to be disruptive. That's kind of the idea. That's the only way other people listen to the message.
No, the great Martin Luther King said, people are eating lunch. Let's limit our struggle to Twitter.
Right. You think it's perfectly fine for protests to be disruptive then? You really think blocking traffic is acceptable? You're really going there? What about the emergency services? Would you feel the same way if your son or your daughter or anyone else you loved and cared for needed an ambulance in a life or death situation, but there was no way for the paramedics to get there because the roads were blocked by protesters? What about if your house was on fire, but the fire truck was stuck in the peaceful protesters' blockade? Are you really that fucking dumb? Or are you just lying? And if the latter is the case, then are you really that fucking psychopathic and narcissistic that you would put this bullshit narrative ahead of your own family's as well as everybody else's safety and welfare? Either way, you're a pair of fucking pricks.
Lee, we have to trust the politicians who have the intel on these protesters. Look.
The vast majority were trucked in, paid by outsiders to the tune of $115 or more a day, plus 3 meals. And then when they're not here, they'll go on and find another protest which they will be subsidized.
He honestly thinks they're getting wined and dined. I think he's confused protesters with lobbyists.
Now, I know for a fact that you're playing the willfully ignorant card now. We all saw the footage where DNC representatives were filmed discussing paid protesters and getting them to antagonise Trump supporters so they'd start fights. So it comes as no surprise that the same thing would be happening here. They advertise it in Craigslist, for fuck's sake! So, Redacted Tonight, I'm calling out your bullshit. I thought the Young Turks were bad enough, but Jesus fucking Christ! A Young Turks wannabe production is taking the fucking piss. Get the fuck out!